Welcome back to SHECAN, where role models lead by example by telling their stories, sharing their insights and lived experiences to support others, because it's easier to be what you can see. And I'm really excited to have Sabrina Baldini with me today. Welcome, Sabrina, to SHECAN.
Hi, thank you for having me.
You're a podcast host and influencer. You're the founder of After Sex Ed, which is a adult sex education company. You're a
Mhm.
viral TikToker. You are a speaker. You've done a TED Talk, and you're a sex educator and coach.
Yes, yes.
Sabrina, so tell us more about yourself and how you feel you got to where you are today.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. Thank you again for having me on. My journey is funny. It's weird. It's definitely not a straight line. It's kind of zigzaggy all over the place. But I guess to start, I would say that I've always felt very strongly about sex education. That's always been something that's been really close to my heart without really having the language to really articulate why. It just, sexual shame bothered me a ton, and I didn't understand why when I was in school I didn't get proper sex ed, why it was glossed over, why I had to learn basically everything on my own
Yeah.
or from my friends who were not teachers. They were not qualified. And then as I got older, I just started to feel more and more passionately about it, that I really would have loved to have an adult in my life that I could have confided in. And I have a mom and she's wonderful, but we didn't really talk about sex, and that's okay. It wasn't her strong suit. But I always felt really passionately about sex ed, and I always did it in a volunteer capacity. So I've been teaching sex education in varying capacities for around 10 years, and it's always been to students. So I get invited to schools, high schools, elementary schools, and universities to talk about consent, menstruation, puberty, consent, you name it. And it was always through charities or crisis centers that I would be brought in to do things like that, always in a volunteer capacity. Never really knew how to make it a job. Like I always had a day job. I like to call it my Bruce Wayne kind of life. And then I had this like sex Batman world where I was like so embroiled in that. I have taught with crisis centers. I have taught with period poverty organizations. And I even quit my job years ago and I went to Kenya and taught sex education there. And I saw that you were in Africa and spent some time there as well.
I
And
have. Yeah.
oh my God, beautiful. And that was very life changing. And when I came back to Toronto, which is where I'm from, this is years ago, I kind of made a deal with myself that I would get better at teaching sex ed. I would pursue it in whatever capacity I could. I would make it a goal. And I did, but I got distracted by my Bruce Wayne life. Like I kept getting pulled in that direction, and that was fine. I was a business development director. I had a lot of success there, enjoyed my job, but then always felt really committed to sex ed. And then as I was teaching, I always kind of observed the same thing over and over again. And I would tell my partner every time I come home from a lesson, I'd say, it's always the adults that have the most questions. Anytime I deliver something in a classroom, whether it's the teacher, whether it's a TA, whether it's a parent or a Cub Scout leader, it doesn't matter who it is. The grown up in the room always pulls me aside afterwards and is like, I didn't learn any of that. My life could have been so much better if somebody sat me down. And I started to see a need for adult sex education so long ago, like so long ago. Um, and then COVID hit, and which of course was only a couple years ago. And I think like a lot of people, I was like, what am I doing with my life? Like a lot of soul searching. Like, what do I care about? What am I passionate about? And sex education was always this in skywriting, big line, like big lights. You want to teach sex ed. And I went back to school and I got a graduate degree in sexual health and rehabilitative medicine from the University of Alberta.
Mhm.
And then during that time, I started a TikTok for fun, purely for fun. Like, just here's what I'm learning. And it blew up. And my bracket on TikTok is older, it's adults. It's like, I get anywhere from like 25 to 70, but really it's 35 to 55. And that's who's asking the most questions. That's who's sharing the content. That's who's clicking. I'm like, it's these the adults. They really need support. And that's after sex ed. That's the genesis of it. And then after blowing up on TikTok and starting a podcast, I kind of just been going full steam ahead since. And I have courses and I have merch and I have all these things. But really the pie in the sky has always been to bring sex education to adults, this very, I think, neglected group of people, like a really neglected bracket. And I think I have a very special place in my heart for adults that sex is so funny because people do it. Lots of people think they're an expert in it, and some people that are really self-aware can admit that they're not. They're like, no, I'm not. I don't know. You're better than that. Or you're better at that. But I just have this very special place in my heart for adults that feel too nervous, like they've hit a certain age and they're like, I can't ask anymore. And it's like, no, you can ask. I've heard it all. So now, since the launch of After Sex Ed, which was about 3 years ago now, I get hired mainly by universities and now starting to get hired by companies like corporations to do consent training, but with a splash of pleasure and sexual wellness, which is oftentimes very neglected. I'm missing something, but but that's what's happening now is I'm getting hired not through charities or organizations, but as me. And I'm also speaking now and doing keynotes and a TED Talk. I did a TED Talk, which was a bucket list thing, all about sex, of course. And here I am now, still kind of processing everything. Like I have days where I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. And then other days I'm like, no, I have a goal. I have a plan.
Well, it looks like it's all come together and you're absolutely in your power with this sex and sexual wellness education.
Yeah.
And it's really inspiring, Sabrina. So tell us a little bit that you're obviously doing this to bring about change, right? You're trying to
Mhm.
change a narrative. And,
Yeah.
when I was young, we certainly didn't have sex
Yeah.
ed. I mean, it was awkward. I think it was one lesson per year and it was awful and it was just embarrassing. And now we're in
Yeah.
2025, and I don't feel that any of my three children had a better sex
Yeah.
education in school. So we are where we are. There's an
Yeah.
enormous amount of improvement that can be made. So tell us a bit more. What change do you want to see in the world, really, that you want to be a part of the solution?
My pie in the sky, my blue sky goal is that people talk about sex like they talk about like ordering lunch. Like we're able to talk about it across the table. Like, oh yeah, you and it's not, and it's shame free, and there's no guilt or dirtiness or anything like that involved. In my TED talk, I opened it with this story. But as long as I've been teaching sex ed, I've always observed really that there's two kinds of questions that I'll get. It doesn't matter the gender, doesn't matter the age, it doesn't matter who it is. There's like these two types of questions. The first one is very anatomical. It's what's my body doing? Why is this happening? I don't understand. And that's like anatomical and physical. And then the other one is, am I normal? And that's so gender orientation, age breaking. I think we have so much more in common than we do different. And I just, after years of observing people really kind of stuck in their head, very concerned that they're not normal, very concerned that they're the only one thinking the thing they're thinking, and surely nobody's like me. It just became more and more heartbreaking. And then I, for so long, had seen the way that people were delivering sex education, even in universities. When I would get invited, I'd get there and university administrators would say, okay, the girls are waiting for you over here. And I'd say, where are the boys? Where are the boys? Like, what's going on? And I kept fighting and advocating for everybody to be in the same room together because we have to listen to each other. We have to. And the more that we're listening to each other, the more that, young men and young women and gay and straight and whoever are not separated, we're in this together. You realize that in a world where it seems like we're so different and so divided, like we have so much more in common. Like we have so much more in common. Sex is our common denominator. I think everybody kind of struggles with this cycle of, am I normal? Like, am I the only one thinking this? Is anybody else thinking these things? And I just want to be part of a movement, part of a message that welcomes everyone, and that there is no stupid question. Like I've said this so many times to kids, to teenagers, to parents, and I also teach parents to how to talk to their kids about sex. There's no dumb question. There really isn't. The worst thing I think that we can do is say nothing and then, cross our fingers and hope that people figure it out. It's like we've done that long enough. We've done that long enough. That's what I hope is shame-free discussions of sex. That would be my
Yeah.
my dream.
Which is an amazing goal to have. And so
Yeah.
much work, Sabrina. And I know that I have three children and they are really embarrassed to talk to me about it. And
Yeah.
and and I never know am I actually really equipped to other than talk about lived experiences.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so what talk to us a little bit about parents with teenage children. What are
Yeah.
the sort of three main things you tell them?
Well, first of all, you just said lived experiences, and I would say please share that. Please share that. Kids want to hear that. Like they want to. Everybody needs something that they can relate to. And one of the questions I always ask when I go into classrooms, always, the first thing I ask is, did your parents talk to you about sex? And it's usually very small amount. I want to say max 10% have put their hands up. And I'm not shading parents. I'm not knocking. I get it. I get it. It can be tough. You don't know where to start. But the second question I always ask is, do you wish that your parents would have talked to you about sex? Do you wish that they would talk to you about it at all? And it's almost always 100%. Like kids are all their hands are always going up. So I think in a world where parents can feel really powerless, like powerless against these big amorphous kind of forces of social media and internet and celebrity and all that stuff, you have so much power. Your kids really still do look up to you, like really want to hear from you. They want to hear what you think about things and the experiences that you've had. And as a sex educator, that's how I usually break ice right away is just share some stuff about me. And that's the best way to connect with another person. Your kids are no different. They just want to know that you're human. Oftentimes I teach menstruation. I share my first story about my first period or how nobody talked to me about it. And I just don't want this to repeat again. Like, thankfully I knew what it was, but I was incredibly embarrassed and didn't want to say anything. So I guess if I had to kind of say three top things to parents, I would say number one, share your experience. You are a human being after all. Like and your experiences are so important to your children. If I hear anything in classrooms, it's that they wish that they want to talk to their parents about sex. So then don't be afraid to share some of the things that have happened to you. Number two, I would say that a lot of parents that I talk to are oh, I see. Sorry. A lot of the parents that I talk to really tend to view the talk as like one talk. And if you could move away from that mindset a bit, it's more like a series of discussions, a willingness to talk. I could certainly never cover all of the topics of sex in one talk. I have built a career around talking about all these different things. And I mean, especially for people that have careers, and I would imagine a lot of your listeners do have a career life and a corporate life. There's open door
Definitely.
policies. I would encourage you to think about sex in that same way. Like the door is open here. So if your kids are talking to you about sex and they're mentioning something about it, a lot of the parents that I talk to tend to bookend it really quickly. Like we talked about condoms and then we're good. It's over.
Mm,
It's like
mm,
try to keep it open, like, or you could talk about condoms, let's say, and then tie it up with, I am always here. You can keep coming back here. Like you can keep coming back here if that's what you want. And I that's what I want. I want to be the main source of education and knowledge for my kids. Like I want them to be able to come to me first, at least before you go to God knows who like I did. And the third thing that I would say about tips for parents is don't be afraid to talk about emotions. Emotions are a very integral part of sex. Like they're a very integral part of sex. Like the two questions that I get from kids, which is, am I normal? And what's my body doing? That's physical and that's psychological. And that is what sex is. It's a marriage of the two. It's like you're not, The reason that I'm saying this is that I oftentimes encounter parents and teachers that when they talk about sex, they kind of make it strictly bodies, like condoms, sperm, egg, uterus, STI prevention, and then they leave it there. But it's like there's this whole other side of the coin here about emotion, connection, excitement, fun, pleasure. Like these things should not be ignored. Oftentimes they are kind of tossed aside, and I think saying something like literally as simple as sex should be fun. Sex should never be something that, makes you feel really, disrespected or ashamed of. That this is the emotion that people feel. And consent, the root word of consent, just so everyone knows, is sharing in a feeling with somebody. That's what it is. Like you share this experience with another human being. So that's why I always get like immediately like my chest gets really tight when parents tell me, oh, I had the talk. I said, wear a condom. If you get pregnant, so help me God, and then I'm good. It's like there's so many other things. And one more thing, if I may, just a little tip for parents too. If you want to broach the subject and you're awkward and they're awkward and you're like, how do I do this? A really great tip that I always often share with parents is to, if you drive, to talk about sex in the car. So this way you are looking forward. You don't have to make eye contact. It's bookended. Like you can say when we get home or whenever we get to where we're going, we don't have to talk about it. Like we'll just use this car ride as an opportunity to talk about it. And that's not just sex. That's like peer pressure, body image, things that might be awkward, but you are important to you. You want to bring it up. I hope that I could go on. I'm going
Amazing,
to stop
Sabrina.
myself.
That's so many good tips. I'm
Okay,
wondering if we can deeply dive into this consent a little more because
sure.
consent wasn't something that my generation grew up with. So we always had boys ask, and they would ask so many times, and I would always think, do they think that if they ask it 5 times, I'm then gonna say yes? So it was that sort of method.
Yeah,
That has changed. So
yeah,
that kind of narrative has changed, and so my boys have to be very aware of this
yeah,
consent thing. So I remember talking to the older one about that, and while it is uncomfortable for them in a way to talk to me about it, I
mhm,
think they understood that, it's something that you enjoy together. So you have to make sure that the other person is on board, and you have to do that possibly several times. So it's not that if you
yeah,
ask them for a kiss, that means you can do whatever you want and
yes,
go much
yeah.
further. So how do you talk to them about consent?
I always, I think everything you're saying is excellent. That you just touched on consent is not finite. It's not, sorry, and it's specific. That's what you just mentioned right
Yeah,
now, which is
yeah.
really important. That it's consenting to kissing, wanting to kiss somebody. That doesn't mean you've consented to sex, intercourse, oral sex. No, it's a specific thing. But you talked about pleasure, and that's the big one. That's the big one that I think a lot of parents and teachers, and that's where people get a little bit uppity, is do we need to talk about pleasure? Do we need to talk
Mm.
about orgasms? Do we need to talk about fun? And my answer is absolutely yes, because after being in classrooms for so I always kind of know this. It's a conceptually that pleasure is really important, but concretely, to give your listeners examples, after being in classrooms for years and and having to deal with administrators as an example, or parents that are weird about sex positivity, they don't really like it. They're just like, stick to the nuts and bolts. It is really impossible to describe what a no looks like and what harm looks like and what abuse looks like without being able to compare it to what a yes looks like and what pleasure looks like and what
Mm.
joy looks like.
Mm.
Because if you're talking to kids, this always happens. You start explaining no's. This is what a no looks like, and you're talking about sexual communication, and they always are like, okay, well, we already talked about no. So, like, what about yes? How about that? And if your reaction to that is like, you shouldn't be saying yes, it can, I don't know. I don't want to mess with someone's head. You know what I mean? So anyways, my answer to your question, I guess, is that yeses and nos are both equally important. And as a parent, as anyone, if you have kids in your life and you want to be able to have these conversations, I would say reflect on this with yourself first. Like, what do you honestly think of people that say yes? Like, what kind of treatment do they deserve? And if you're sex positive, like I am, and it sounds like you are, then when people say no, they deserve kindness and respect. We respect that. And when people say yes, they also deserve kindness and respect. It doesn't change. And the best way to know that you are not causing harm and the best way to know that you're not hurting somebody would be to make them feel good, to ask them what they like, to talk to them, to engage with them, and understand that sex is, like you were saying, it's a human activity. It requires practice. Like, you have to kind of get to know that person. The best way to get to know that person would be to talk to them.
Mm.
And that's a big part of my classroom when I talk about sex. And it's also part of my TED Talk too, is that I'm always really emphatic that when people have sex in real life, they talk. They're talking. They're laughing. You can check in. You can talk to each other. Sex is awkward. It's messy. Like, you're not perfect. The best way to know that what you're doing, with this other person is fun for them is to talk. And the reason I'm like saying talk, talk, talk is that I've had kids kind of make this comment many times in my classes that they thought only dirty talk. Like, that's what grown-ups do when they have sex. It's like only dirty talk, or you just kind of moan and make noises. And it's like, I know that you're seeing this on TV or you're seeing this on the internet, and the reality of sex is that it's a communication activity. Like, it's where people are just really vulnerable and you're like actually having conversations. Anyways, I hope that helped.
I think that's so important what you just said, Sabrina, because I think that really with the porn culture around,
Yeah.
it shows, it role models a way that's not necessarily the sex that we as normal people live.
Yeah.
And I think there is so much stigma still around it, and I think there
Oh
is a
yeah.
lot of shame, and I think people think all the time that they're doing everything wrong, and
Mhm.
and then they're embarrassed and they don't really know, and it's not a communicative thing actually.
Mhm.
And I feel that there is so much we need to change about that narrative, and every school should teach our children, and every parent should try at least to
Yeah.
broach all of these subjects, because not so much has changed,
That's,
since.
it's like some days I think we're getting better, and then other days I'm like, yeah, it's not that great. Like,
No.
there's so much room for improvement, so much.
Yeah, I mean, I really never ever talked about it up until a couple of years ago, I would say. A couple
Mhm.
of years ago, I thought actually, times are changing, and we can think about that, and we can reframe that. And I'm 53. So I
Mhm.
sort of think, thankfully it seems to change, but it has, there is so much improvement that can be made. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking also, Sabrina, there is such a push from the far right of these puritanical values, and it's really
Yeah.
going back to producing a ton of children, and it's all hush hush, and the woman has to be perfect from every aspect, in terms of body, but also, anything we deal with as a woman, we have to sort of just silently do it. And, and the rise in sexual violence. And there's quite a lot actually going against the more libertarian push
Yeah.
that we really would need to see in order for more sexual wellness among people. And so how do you deal with that? How do you show up with this new, you know?
I know. It's not to like throw to my TED Talk again, but I do talk about that in my TED Talk. It would be impossible to ignore this rise that you're talking about, and it can feel very overwhelming and very scary. Um, um, but I guess what I like how I deal with it is always remembering, again, in my world, though I think the worst thing that we could do is ignore that.
Mm,
I'm constantly confronted, especially as a parent. And if I'm talking to parents right now who have these concerns, I think that saying nothing is just as bad as saying the wrong thing. Say something, okay? Just call it out. And sex positivity is, I think, like a lot of things, has what's the word I'm looking? It's been misconstrued by people. And here's what sex positivity is, and I would encourage people to try to talk about sex in this way. Sex positivity has three main tenets. Number one, sex is not a shame-based activity. So this framework that you might have in your head of good and bad and clean and dirty and right and wrong is entirely socially constructed. The truth about sex is that it's healthy. It's a healthy part of the human experience. Like, always try to keep that in mind when you're talking to somebody. Number two, sex is a pleasure-based activity. So people have sex for a bunch of different reasons. Some people have sex to get pregnant. Some people can't get pregnant. Some people go out of their way to not get pregnant. But the common denominator is that sex feels good and it's fun. And if you honestly believe that sex is a pleasure-based activity, then there's no reason that two men can't do that and two women can't do that and a lady couldn't do that with a toy. That's what it is. Pleasure is inclusive. Always try to keep that in your mind, that pleasure protects all of us because it includes everybody. It's incredibly inclusive. And the third tenet is honoring bodily autonomy. The decision to say yes to sex and the decision to say no to sex is very private and it's personal. And if anybody tries to push you to do something with your body that you don't want to do, or tries to convince you to do something with it, the reason that they're doing that is that they're trying to control you. And if they respect you, they will respect your no and your yes. And the reason I'm saying all of this is that I think that parents tend to not touch these subjects because they're scared they're going to say the wrong thing. Think about that in your mind. Reflect on whether or not you're sex positive, if it resonates, and I hope it does. Just remember that when you're talking to somebody, that shame is taught, pleasure is healthy, and it protects people. Pleasure protects people, and that bodily autonomy is an inalienable human right. Always keeping that in mind. And I guess the reason I'm saying all of that is that it can feel really overwhelming in a world where we're getting all these far right messages, online messages. It's all kind of ramping up online. Human, real world conversations and interactions, in my opinion, will always win. They'll always win. So engaging people in a sex positive way around sex, I think, can move not just the needle, but it can move mountains. It's a big deal. I've always kind of said this, that my classrooms, I tend to be really hopeful about the future. I tend to be really hopeful about young men, even, because I think that in a world where it looks like they're not getting it, in my classrooms in real life, they are. And I guess how I deal with it is that I try to keep these conversations going outside of classrooms. I try to always remember this main tenet of men and women have far more in common than we do different. Gay and straight, far more in common than we do different. Cis and trans, same. We have way more in common. That's the way I try to position all of my conversations. That's my philosophy that's in my head, is when you're up against something that's so divisive, when you're up against kids talking this way, you can hear them regurgitating that content, that red pill content. I always circle back to, like, what do we have in common? Start with the common ground. This sex, everybody wants to be respected. Everybody wants to know that they can be vulnerable in front of somebody and not be concerned for their safety, not be concerned that they will be judged or harmed. I think always remembering that, especially between like men and women, because it just feels like the gender divide is getting bigger and bigger,
Yeah.
that remembering that, trying to kind of always bring that top of mind, particularly I think to young men, that women are not, sex is not meant to be adversarial. It's not meant to be a fight this way you're describing, like she's withholding and she's a gatekeeper. No, it's a shared experience. You have way more in common with her. The reason you want her is the same reason she wants you. She likes you.
Yeah.
That's it. It's not because of some ridiculous thing that some podcaster said. God, I know that was a long answer. I
No,
could go
I
on and
love it. I love it, Sabrina. You're amazing, and you're giving us so much information and food for thought. And as you were talking, I thought I've been listening to Amy Poehler's podcast, and she was
oh
interviewing
yeah.
Dakota Johnson, and she was sort
Okay.
of asking her, what about the sex scenes? And it might be 7 a.m. and how are you psyching yourself up to the sex scene? And Dakota Johnson just replied and said, Amy, I don't have to psych myself up. I'm always up for sex. And it
Yeah,
sounded
yeah.
funny, but it almost sounded like a, rebel revolutionary thought in
Mhm.
2025. And it was
Yeah, yeah.
visible that Amy Poehler was like, oh, and I just thought, why is it strange to
Yeah.
us that when someone is so comfortable with themselves to be able to say
Mm.
that and say that in a funny way, that we sort of think, oh, it's almost
Yeah.
still not okay to give this answer. And she was
Yeah.
talking about how her mother is such an amazing role model and really, gave her this body positivity, and she is so confident in herself. And you know
Mhm.
and I just thought, wow, that's revolutionary. I don't think I've ever heard anyone speak like that.
Oh God. See how
And
powerful sex is? It's so powerful
yeah.
when harnessed, when yeah, when you're unapologetically not shameful. You're not letting shame win.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I love when you talk about start with a common ground, because it is
Yeah.
a shared experience and you are
Mm.
sharing something with someone. It's a connective and community activity. And
Yeah.
so, you're communing with another person, no matter what their gender is, and it's about this shared experience. So,
Hmm. Hmm.
tell us a bit more about this TED Talk. TED Talks
Yeah.
are often bucket list items, but they are also really scary. You stand
Yeah.
on stage, you have to learn everything by heart. You're
Yeah.
preparing possibly for months, and then you're there. So tell us a bit more about, how did you prepare for it? Were you
Oh my God.
excited? Were you literally thinking, oh my God, how am I going to do this? How did you psych yourself up for that? I mean, you have a lot to say. Obviously, that
I'm
helps.
I'm always psyched. I'm always psyched for TED Talk. I'm kidding. I'm not always ready. Um, you're right. I was channeling Dakota Johnson just then, trying to tell myself. You're right. You're right. You're right about everything. Very bucket list. I applied. I got it, and I was like, "What have I done? What am I doing? What did I get myself into?" But my TED Talk was kind of noodling around in my head for years. Like for years, I was thinking about it, and you only have 18 minutes, and mine was like 17:40. Like I was so close to
Wow.
18. I could have gone on for hours. Like my original TED Talk was like 25 hours long. um I How did I prepare? I had this kind, like I was saying, tooling around in my head for years, and you had mentioned this revolutionary thing that Dakota Johnson said, that like, what a revolutionary thing to say around sex. And my TED Talk is about sexual revolutions. So it's kind of a snapshot, a little brief history, a little brief lesson in the history of sex. And that we have had two sexual revolutions so far. We've had one in the 1920s, which was like flapper era.
Yeah.
And that was coinciding with the suffragette movement. Women are getting voting rights, gaining greater access to independence. And with this independence comes a shaking up of sex, always, because sex is power. And women have more of it. And then the next sexual revolution is around the 60s. So that's like the free love hippie movement. Birth control pill comes out, women are working, access to bank accounts, widespread access to the birth control pill, legalization of abortion rights, especially in the US, is circa this era. That's the 70s. So big shaking up of gender roles, like big shaking up of sex. So my TED Talk is about how, excuse me, we've had these two sexual revolutions so far, and that they are around 40 years apart. So that means that we're due. We're due for a third, and we're actually overdue. Because if it hit when it was supposed to hit, it would have been around 2010. That would have been our
Mm.
third revolution. And I talk about all the things I've observed over the course of, the last like 10 years teaching sex ed, not just in classrooms, but all the behaviors I'm seeing online too. Like language around sex is changing, this resurrection of really puritanical attitudes, what this means for us as a society. And I argue in the TED Talk, and I believe it in my heart, that we're in the wave, we're in the third wave of the sexual revolution, and it's romantic. We're
Mm.
entering into our next romance age. I know it's hard to see. I know it's like she's hiding in there somewhere, but romance is in there, and I have data to support it, and yeah, studies to back it up that we're kind of teetering into our third revolution, and that it's guided by romance, because romance, like in keeping with what you were saying before, what we were talking about, finding a common ground. Like everybody wants romance. Like everybody wants it. It's
Yes.
so fun. It's so exciting, to have a crush, to be wanted by somebody is like that's we all have this in common. And we all, if you want somebody and they want you back, it's the most exciting feeling in the world. And we all deserve to be respected,
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
deserve to be respected
Yeah.
if we engage. But anyways, that's
Maybe
that's my TED talk.
that's maybe also sort of a going against all this life online, to bring
Yeah.
that romance back, and yeah, and it's the age of Aquarius, I guess, that all goes hand in hand.
Oh, that is true. Huh.
Yeah, I mean, the
Missed that
world is
part.
definitely becoming more, or trying to become more empathetic
Yeah,
and more
trying to, yeah.
connected, even though we don't see that right now. And Sabrina, so what do you feel needs to be changed in terms of an education system? How do we need to, how do we need to reframe this sex ed
Oh
edu?
my God. I will
So you,
try to make it concise.
that could be 5 hours long. I know that.
Yeah, it could. I would start. I'll try to make it concise. I will. I would say that the best way, as far as education is concerned, the best thing that we could do as a community, like as a society, to lift sex out of stigma, and to also keep people safe, to prevent sexual violence from happening anymore. Because in the midst of all of these revolution, the third revolution that maybe we're sitting in, we had the Me Too movement. That's like the first time ever in my lifetime that consent became dinner table discussion.
Yeah.
People like my mom was talking about it. What is all of this? And I was like, okay, I think we're moving the needle. Finally, like this conversation, I've been so steeped in this world for so long that I talk about consent all the time and I talk about violence prevention all the time. But when that hit dinner table discussions, it felt like we're getting somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think if we want to make big societal changes and lift sex out of stigma and prevent sexual violence from happening anymore, we have to kind of zoom out and look at the bigger picture. A reinvestment from our education system and our community and from parents into the arts. Children are in desperate need of art. Art helps children, because I'm thinking about kids and how to make consent palatable for them, to have them understand consent and sex in a way that they can carry with them their whole life and they can understand it when they're little. Is that art and sport and sex have a lot in common. These are these three big activities where you play. You're playful with somebody, you're respectful and kind, but you play with them. And these are all three activities where you express emotion. And all of these three activities, especially art and sport, and we'll park sex aside for just a moment, but art and sport is where you feel big emotion, very joyful, like very, especially if you're playing with somebody else, especially if you're sharing your art with somebody else. And it helps kids to understand that emotional expression is very important. You need it, and that it helps you to emotionally regulate as well. So as far as art is concerned, I think making that a key tenet of not just sex education, but just like it has to be reinvested back in our school systems. There's lots of data and lots of studies to show that the spikes in mental health disorders in kids have been correlated with the defunding of the arts. This has been going on a very long time. And where I live in Toronto, and I'm sure it happens in all other parts of the world, whenever governments want to save money, they go after public education, and it's always art and gym, art and gym, art and gym. Nobody cares about these two subjects, and they're so important for us. They're so important for kids to understand that art is a place where you express yourself, and it can be very personal and very private in the same way that sex is. Like, you want to understand your own sexuality and you want to express yourself and dress a certain way because it feels good for you and it feels right for you to do that. And you could maybe, as far as art is concerned, write in a journal And that's you creating art, and you're getting your emotions out and you're expressing them because it feels good for you to do that. And you could decide to always keep that private for you, and that's okay. But you could also decide to take that journal and publish it and put it, now you're putting your art into the world and you're being very vulnerable and you're leaving it out there for other people to connect with. And like, that's literally what life is about. That is no different than sex. It's the same thing. You have your own sexuality. It's very private. It's yours. It's personal. And then you could decide to share that with somebody, and you're taking a risk. You're being vulnerable, and you have to understand that they're being vulnerable with you too. I think if we wanted to see a big change, it's not as simple as people saying no means no. I'm constantly encountering parents that talk like that. And I'm not saying that that's bad. I'm just saying we have to really back up and look at all of it. I think the best way that we could really create effective change would be to have a reinvestment in the arts. And you can do that at home with your kids. Painting, singing, dancing, the creating, having them understand that getting their emotions out is really important. And that if they decide to share in that emotion, like if they want to dance with somebody, it feels great to share that experience with somebody, but you have to ask, and somebody has to ask you too. And I feel the same way about sport as well. It feels good to work out and feel good about your body, and that feels good, and that's private and personal for you. But it can feel wonderful to share in sport with another human being and play with them. And like sex and art and sport just like have this common thread that run all the way through it. That is play.
Yeah.
And I think if we can do that, if I could wave a wand somehow and have at least, I mean, I guess at least parents understand that maybe we can't make big policy changes yet. Maybe one day we can do that effectively, come together, but you can do that at home. You can you can invest in art. You can make that a priority in your kids' upbringing, in their expressions. You can talk about sport, moving their bodies and respecting other people's bodies, and relate it to sex. There is a common thread that runs through all of it.
Yeah, Sabrina, amazing. And it's this being able to experiment and explore and yeah, yeah. Sabrina, so what plans and goals do you have this year and beyond?
Well, 2025 was the year of Sabrina, I told myself. I did the TED Talk in January, and I was like, that's it. The TED Talk it's the year of me. So my goals, I kind of unbeknownst to me, I started getting opportunities for more speaking engagements, and people want to hear me talk, and that's great. So my goal, I think, I'm setting it realistically, is to book more speaking engagements and get in front of more adults, especially parents,
Yeah.
to talk about sex. That is a big goal for me, is to get an audience with parents so that they are less intimidated by conversations about sex. We can figure it out in a way that feels right for you. I guess more like tangible goals. I'm coming up with more courses. I have a course on sex drive mismatches, which is by far my most popular. That's when someone's high drive and someone's low drive and they're like
Mm.
headbutting, and that's the whole thing. That's my most popular course. I have one on porn literacy, and I'm going to start doing more on talking to your kids about consent, talking to your kids about porn, talking to your kids about menstruation. And I'd like to do one about opening up your marriage, because that's another big one I get a lot of questions about. So exploring polyamory. So more courses this year for sure. And I guess another goal would be that, because my presence online, I don't know if you feel the same way. When you're so online, you can lose sight of the community around you, and I kind of became this de facto sex lady in my neighborhood. Like when people see me, they're like, "Are you that sex? You're the sex one." I'm like, "Yeah, that's me." But then I love how that makes me. I love that sometimes everything gets lost in the haze of online and the comments and the hate and the blah. And then I forget that, oh my God, my neighbors are looking at this, and I think I want to be more active in my community and remember that in a world that feels very big and very divided and very overwhelming, like you have neighbors here and you have a community here that needs you. Like
Yeah.
they need you, and show your face, get out there so that, people understand always that you have way more in common. Everybody's got way more in common with each other than they do different. I
Yeah.
guess those are my goals.
Yeah, I love it. So what takeaways would you like our listeners to have from your story?
Oh my God. I guess as far as like me, like I'm concerned, I I think this happened to a lot of people during COVID, but I was like 36 or 37 when I went back to school. I was 38 when I started my podcast, at 39 when I started launching courses and speaking engagements. And I was like 38 doing TikTok dances. Like, I was like, what am I doing? And then I'm 41 now, and my life took this big turn. And I guess I would say that age is so like nothing. I was so scared of age when I was younger. Like, oh, I'm running out of time. Now I'm like, that is hilarious. Like, you have so much, I mean, you have so much time in that. Like, I don't want to make it sound like you can, dawdle. I just mean that my perspective on time changed a lot. And 30 to me was ancient. Like, I have to have everything, figured out by 30, and that's hilarious because I didn't. And now 40 to me, I mean, when I was a kid, 40 seemed like, oh my God, like it's over. But I feel like, oh my God, it's just starting.
Yeah.
I feel wise. I feel wise, and I feel so much more confident. If this is what aging is like, as the years like kind of tack on, I just feel so more and more motivated. I guess my final message from people as far as like my journey is concerned is that it's never too late to start something, and that age is such a frivolous thing, you know? It's like a big deal if you let it be a big deal, but then whatever.
I think this is a perfect finish, Sabrina. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for everything that you are and do, and for changing the narrative, and for giving us so much hope with the romantic age coming.
Oh, let's cross our fingers. Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled. Thank you.